They say that time heals all wounds, but what if some wounds, the ones born from betrayal, from broken trust, from the people who were supposed to love us and didn't, what if those wounds don't heal with time? What if they just what if they just hide? If you've ever loved someone deeply and been devastated by them, if you've ever looked into the mirror and struggled to recognize the person staring back, if you've ever wondered whether healing is even still possible at this point in your life, perhaps this episode is for you. Welcome to Senior to Seniors, a podcast built by someone who has lived some life for people who have lived a lot of it, where life experiences meets real wisdom, real stories, and real answers. I'm your host, Jim Mazziotti, and today we are sitting down with a man whose story is perhaps going to shake you just a little bit, whose wisdom is going to steady you, and whose message, I promise you, will stay with you long after this episode ends. He was 14 years old, walking 10 miles between two jobs in the dark, no bus fare, no father, no safety net. He had been abused, bullied, placed in special education, pushed out onto the streets, and held at gunpoint. The world had written him off before he ever had a chance to write his own story, and yet he still stands. A husband of nearly 20 years, a father, a man who served this country not once but twice in both the United States Army and the Air Force, a master's level educator, a published author, a certified betrayal trauma practitioner, a minister, an inspirational speaker, and a coach who has made a personal promise, a promise he has never broken, that he would never charge what the people who need him most cannot afford. Because he remembers exactly what it felt like to be broken and broke at the very same time. His name is Mr. J, and he didn't just survive the worst that life could throw him. He turned every single scar into a credential. Every now and then a guest comes along and you just know before the first question is even asked that this is going to be one of those conversations that changes something in you. Today is perhaps one of those days, because whether you are carrying an old wound that never fully closed, navigating a relationship that has left you shattered, trying to understand why certain hurts from decades ago still have their hands around your throat, or simply wondering if it is too late to feel whole again, I think Mr. J is living proof that no matter how broken the crayon, it can still color. Mr. J, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Senior to Seniors.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you having me on your show.
And I'm so glad to have you here. Your motto, which people just heard in your introduction, even broken crayons still color. You didn't come up with that phrase sitting around in a comfortable office. I think it came from the life you've lived, because you were a product of divorced. You were raised in poverty, placed in special education, forced to move at 14, and eventually became homeless. Tell me, what does that mean to you? Even broken crayons still color.
Yeah, well, Jim, not only do I believe broken crayons still color, but I believe broken crayons can create masterpieces.
Yeah.
And I won't turn this into a church service, but I think if you also step into a faith background, as I also have, and you allow yourself to open up to something bigger than you. You could be used as a vessel, even all the things that you've been through. So that's you summed up quite well a lot of the intro. And I always say that lots of wisdom here, but it's all wisdom born from pain.
Yeah.
So it's all good. And I say all the time, it's very difficult to love yourself when you hate a lot of the components that made you who you are.
Yeah. It appears, you have a master's degree, you have military service contracts, Army and Air Force, and you have life coach certifications and a ministry, but it appears that you were your own first client. So what does that mean, and why should it matter more to our listeners than any diploma that you have on the wall?
Yeah. What's interesting is anytime I'm interviewed, and I completely understand why the process is they go through your pedigree, your experience, your education, and your certifications, and your
Right.
credentials, and your diplomas,
Yeah.
and that's great, fine, and dandy. But I'll tell you something: when you're in the ravine, when you're in the ditch with these people, really all they want to know is, listen, have
Yeah.
you been in my shoes, and can you get me out?
Yeah.
Because I'm suffering and I'm in pain. And I always say, you need the degrees, the certifications, need them. But I'll tell you something, there's no substitute for experience. And I
Yeah.
think when that all comes together collaboratively, then you have the perfect melting pot.
Yeah. Well, most seniors, I believe, have never heard the clinical term betrayal trauma. As a matter of fact, I never had until, I met you online and read about you. But you describe it, the shock when someone you trusted completely turns on you, and it can be a spouse, it can be a child, a lifelong friend, or even in the church community. I mean, it can be anywhere. So talk about what betrayal trauma is, so my senior listeners can maybe grab onto it and understand what our conversation is going to be about today.
Absolutely. So let me just start with this. Stress affects us.
Yeah.
Uh, Trauma overwhelms us. Betrayal trauma realigns us.
Hmm.
Because, and I think you put it very perfectly in your opening, um, you said something along the lines of, and I'll put my own words to it,
Yeah.
betrayal trauma affects our identity. And here's the reason why. When we are with somebody that we have a reliance upon or a dependency upon,
Hmm.
we co-create with them. So it's almost like you take a flower and you cut the stem and you put the different pieces of the stem in different color. The flower itself is going to change colors. So when we break from a shocking discovery in our relationships with those where we have a dependency upon, then it completely um, separates us from ourselves.
Hmm.
It's an identity rupture, which is why it's very difficult to heal from this. Now, let me just say this. I don't believe in the term healing, as probably a good majority of mental health professionals say. I don't know if you can heal from betrayal trauma. I'm going to be honest with you. What
Hmm.
I do know
Hmm.
is that you can certainly integrate it and learn how to manage it and have it work for you.
Hmm.
So just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Well, and so you specialize in something that you defined in the research I did about you in something called betrayal blindness. And this one kind of stunned me when I researched it. Can you explain why our minds literally block us from seeing betrayal that's happening right in front of our eyes? Because it happens all the time.
Absolutely.
And I really had never thought about it until I started researching you and reading about you. But I think seniors are especially vulnerable to this kind of blindness. Do you think? Do you think that's true?
I do think they are, absolutely. Let me just first say this. Betrayal blindness it's a phrase that was coined by Jennifer Freed in the 90s. And basically, what she found was that it is a part of our nervous system, fight, flight, freeze.
Hmm.
And it's actually meant to keep us safe, believe it or not, but it winds
Right.
up doing a lot more damage than it's good. So basically, let me just very quickly remind your listeners of the Little Red Riding Hood story. Little Red Riding Hood wanted to see her grandmother, and so bad that she ignored the fact there was a big bad wolf in the forest. And she went and she, trotted through the forest with her basket of whatever she made, banana bread and oatmeal cookies. And she knocks on the door, but she didn't hear her grandmother's voice. And so something inside of her, her instinct, her gut, her intuition was whispering in her ear, but betrayal blindness kicked in. So it's like, no, I want to see my grandmother. Everything's okay. I want to see my grandmother. And so then she opens up the door. Grandma, are you here? She knows that something's up because grandma usually comes running. But what betrayal blindness comes in, and it suppresses reality so we can connect with our wishes.
Hmm.
And so she starts thinking, well, maybe she's in the back picking something to pickle, or maybe she's in back picking flowers, whatever. She ignores that gut intuition she has. Then she goes into the back room, and now her gut is screaming at her, get out, leave, close the door, do something. Because she even says, Grandma, why do you have a long, mouth and sharp teeth and beady eyes? And it was to her demise. And this is what happens when we are going along in life. We're comfortable, we're safe, we love predictability, and hopefully
Hmm.
we talk a little bit about the hippocampus and predictability here and why it's important. But I digress. What happens is when we are driving down the street and we happen to see our husband or wife having coffee with their boss in a coffee shop, we say, oh, they're so nice. Their boss is going through a divorce and my wife or my husband's, helping them through that divorce. Or we go into our car and we see a blonde hair, but our spouse is brunette. And we're like, oh, my husband or my wife has a secretary and they were just giving him a ride home. They're so nice. And that's betrayal blindness, because what happens is that if betrayal blindness doesn't kick in, then we're faced with the reality of the situation. And then what happens is it's too overwhelming and it's too devastating to us. Because then what happens is we say, well, wait a minute. I just got married and we just spent $30,000 on a wedding. And if this is real and this is true, now I'm going to be embarrassed because I just got married, or now I'm going to go through a divorce and my kids are going to have to visit every other parent every other. I don't want to do that to my kids, and I don't want to do that. So let me just pretend it's not happening. And this
Yeah.
happens a lot of times on a subconscious level. That's
Yeah.
betrayal blindness. But what happens, and then I'll be quiet, I promise, when the reality does come into our life and we're like, no, this is real, this is what's going on. Now we're trying to heal from that devastating bomb that exploded in our life when we've been so uh, we've detached from our own selves. We've not leaned into our gut. We've pushed our intuition down, and so now we don't even know who we are while we're trying to navigate healing from this devastation.
And we all do that. We all, as you're talking, as you're describing it, I'm thinking about,
Yes.
occasions in my life, and I think those listening today can probably do that as well. And a hard question I think many of our listeners are silently sitting with right now. As they listen to this, they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. They've survived painful betrayal, maybe a divorce after 30 years, and an adult child who cut them off or took advantage of them. I just talked to somebody yesterday. He was talking about his son that basically cleaned their family completely clean of all their financial worth because they gave everything to him. And as it turns out, they lost everything because of betrayal blindness, or at least blindness. So somewhere deep down, people believe it's maybe too late to heal from this. We've experienced, I'm in trauma, but I'm too old to start over. So when you're dealing with people in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, how do you help them start over? What do you say directly to a person right now who's listening that may be going through betrayal?
Hmm. Yeah, well, very good question. First of all, I don't necessarily subscribe to the term start over. I believe every opportunity we get, we don't necessarily start from scratch. We start from experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I always say if you got one day left in your life, then that's a day you can learn something. One of the things that I think is very important for people to reflect and do some introspection on with anything in life, especially a trauma from betrayal, is where were my boundaries and why didn't I enforce them?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the reason why and let it be very, very known, I'm not blaming the victim at all. I just want to emphasize that there's lessons to be learned so we can ensure we don't put ourselves in the same position again. You A lot of times there's a lack of enforced boundaries that occur. Now, listen, just for your listeners, let me just say a couple things just to put some context.
Okay.
Betrayal trauma can only occur if we have a dependency upon someone, if we have a resilience, a reliance upon someone. So, like, for instance, you know, uh, two people can be in a car accident, um, and one can be traumatized and one can't be, or what have you. But that's trauma in general. Betrayal trauma, there has to be a
Mm,
relationship
I
where there's a
see.
dependency. So that could be from a job because you
Uh-huh.
depend on your job.
Uh-huh.
That certainly can be if you're a senior and you're depending on, a caregiver or your child. Absolutely. Um, we could have betrayal trauma, believe it or not, from our Creator, from God. For I've spoken with many women who are like,
Sure.
Mr. J, I've I've been healthy all my life and I've had a strong faith all my life and I've drank my shakes and I've did my yoga and I was still diagnosed with breast cancer. I feel my Creator betrayed me.
Yeah, where was he? Where was he? He
Absolutely. We can have a betrayal from ourselves, actually. And we can have a betrayal from uh, somebody unaliving themselves. My brother was my best friend. He took his life. Now I feel betrayed by my brother because he took away my best friend.
yeah.
So as long as you have a reliance upon or a dependency upon. Now, having said that, betrayal trauma is different from non-betrayal trauma. And just for your listeners, I want to quickly say this
Okay.
for a couple of reasons, but just for the interview process, for time wise, I'll just give you three. When it comes to trauma, we don't question ourselves. When it comes to betrayal trauma, we question ourselves. So let's just say you find out your spouse, your significant other, your partner is having an affair or meeting with people, secretly outside of you. Um, we now are asking ourselves, what's wrong with me?
Yeah, what
Why
did I
wasn't
do
I
wrong?
good enough?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, it's a secret society. If you are traumatized, let's just say from anything, a car accident or a family loss or a death of a parent, you have people coming out of the woodwork for you. Your neighbors are bringing you macaroni and cheese, and your aunts and uncles are bringing you, lasagna, and everybody's sending you cards, and your job gives you some bereavement time. When you discover that somebody you loved and trusted the most, even more so than you trusted yourself, betrayed your trust, you are devastated, but you don't necessarily want to share it with people because there's shame, there's guilt, there's embarrassment, which makes that journey that much more hard to heal from. And the last thing about betrayal trauma that differs from, say, non betrayal trauma is trauma in and of itself affects the here and now and the future. Betrayal trauma is the only trauma that also includes affects the past because now you can't go to restaurants you used to go to before because maybe if your spouse took somebody their secretary, you can't go to that restaurant anymore. You can't look at old family vacation photos anymore because now you're thinking, well, wait a minute, when we were in Disney and you had to leave to go to a work meeting, did you actually go to a work meeting or were
Mm-hmm.
you meeting up with somebody or going to a massage parlor or something like that? So it's
Mm-hmm.
the only trauma that affects the past, present, and the future. But one of the things I want to say, just to go back to your question, is immediately when we discover and we acknowledge the betrayal, the trauma of betrayal. One of the quick things we have to do is immediately realign our thought process, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't know if you ever heard of something called quickcrete, but it's basically this like sandy stuff. It's
Hmm.
concrete, and the minute you add water,
Right.
you only got a matter of seconds before it starts to get hard.
Yeah.
What happens is the minute our body is shocked with a betrayal from somebody that we loved and trusted, the narrative we put in our mind starts to solidify. And then what we do on the healing process not only is to heal from the shock and devastation of the bomb that somebody detonated in our life, but now we have to start chiseling away at the narrative we put in our mind. So, for example, if I'm sitting in front of a couple and one of them says, "How could you do that to me? Do you think I'm that ugly?" Or, "How could you do that to me? Do you think I'm that worthless?" These are all our own meanings we assign to somebody else's behavior that now we have to additionally work through along with the healing journey.
So, when do you generally talk to people who are going through this? I mean, you know, what you've said, it's like you need to be on, you need to be in my phone. I need to, you know what I'm saying? Because it can turn into cement. I mean, and it can just add and add. So how do people who are facing numerous types of betrayal, or maybe even realizing them as they age, um, how do they deal with it, and when do they reach out to people like you?
Yeah, great question. One of the things and it's kind of sad because you said I'm at an age now where I've had a lot of life experiences, but I never heard of betrayal trauma.
Uh-huh.
So, one
Yeah.
of the good things is that even though I don't want to say this is a baby field. I mean, from a mental health standpoint, it is relatively new, but it is really getting out there. That's number one.
Okay.
Now, I have clients that have just discovered a betrayal in their relationship that day, and I'm talking to them while they're bear hugging the toilet, vomiting because
Mm,
they're dealing with it. I also have people that are 30, 40 years after their betrayal
right.
that have just never integrated, healed from, or something happened in their life where this is getting brought up. So they're dealing with it for the first time. One of the other things that I do, and I don't even have it in my bio, is I'm a wedding officiant. So oftentimes I'll officiate people's weddings.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I ask couples that come to me is, "Do you want any premarital coaching?" Because I certainly will recommend it, and that's it. Because the more we know, the better. Because I can't tell you, Jim, how many times I'm officiating a wedding and there's usually a young couple in front of me and they're exchanging I do's and they don't even know who the I am is.
Yeah.
And so this is another reason why it's very easy. And again, I don't want to blame the victim of betrayal, but the more we know of ourselves, the more we know who ourselves, the more we're going to listen to that gut intuition when it comes calling, the more we can set boundaries, the more we can enforce boundaries. But again, to get back to your question, it's never too late to start picking up the broken pieces. It just might take a little bit longer because that concrete has set in.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you something, especially betrayal trauma hits us at our core insecurities. So what we do is we assign our core insecurities the meaning to the betrayal. And that's some of the things that's hardest to heal from. Because I say all the time, a lot of our trauma is basically simply dismantling the lies we believed that we either told ourselves or other people told us.
Hmm. Yeah. I think what's important for the listeners today, and when I read your bio, when I read about you and the betrayal that I had never heard before, um, I knew I had to introduce people to this because I can't be the only one that. And like you said, it's rather new, but I think it's important for people to know that you've counseled people in the most raw, desperate moments imaginable. And reading about you, you know, with crisis hotlines and psychiatric hospitals and group homes. Um, when someone you're dealing with people who've had sleepless nights and they're replaying every moment and rage rage is building, what are the first two or three things that you tell them uh, when you're counseling them that might actually work, especially for the older person, you know, the people that are listening to this whose emotional support network may be smaller than it once was. And I think that's why this is important, because so many seniors, I mean, they live all around me. Mr. J, I
Yeah.
live in a senior community, a Del Webb senior community, and I can see all of these people, and you know, I don't know their lives, but I know that they've had, you know, after studying this a bit, that they have traumas, and they have trauma deep inside, and and so how do you work, especially with seniors that have this built-in cemented trauma in their lives? How do you start? What are the first one or two things you do?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, one of the things that that I recommend to people, and again, he, the spectrum is of healing is quite varied and wide. So if people are not in a state of emotional flashbacks or triggers, and I'm happy to talk about triggers if we have time and you want me to, but because triggers from betrayal will literally take somebody to their knees.
Mm,
And those are the thoughts, the flashbacks that you get.
hmm.
So one of the things that I really try to tell people to do is number one, is when able, when your mind is not hijacked from a trigger, try to create what's called a needs assessment, because everybody's needs are going to be different. Um, uh, no matter what your age is, your needs are going to be different. So let me just start by saying, you know, if I'm dealing with a young single mother who has kids,
Yeah.
and she's in the fetal position in bed crying for 8 hours a day because she's devastated, but her kids still have to eat. So maybe she needs 3 apps on her phone where just by a touch of a button, there's a pizza delivered to her house within a half an hour, because there's no way she can get out of bed and cook, but her kids still need to eat. Let's just say there's somebody who is a person of faith. What are 3 people that you can write down where you can give them just the gist of what happened, where when you call them or you reach out to them, they don't ask you a bunch of questions. They immediately just start going into prayer with you.
Mm,
Or let's just say that, you know, whatever your needs are. So, you know, obviously everybody's needs are varied. So I try to really recommend and encourage people, when you're not in a state of complete mind hijacking, when you're in a logical prefrontal cortex state, try to write down what your needs are. What do you need? And 3 resources for those needs. Number 2, and it's funny because this is so fundamental, but a lot of people struggle with this, is simply journaling,
yeah.
because we have so many things that go up in our head, that are in our head, and we have all this information that's in our head, and it's almost like a bottle of soda that's closed. When you shake it and shake it and shake it, if you don't release that cap, the bottle eventually is going to explode. We have all these things in our head, so why not write it down on paper? Get it out of your head. Now, studies show that if you do journal, it really shouldn't be on a phone. It really shouldn't be on a computer. It should really be pen and paper.
Yeah.
And studies also show that if you're going to journal, it would be beneficial if you write with your non-dominant hand. Now, there's studies and research for that. I won't get into that right now for time purposes.
Yeah.
Now, some people are saying, well, holy cow, I can't even write with my non-dominant hand. That would be chicken scratch. Well, you're not supposed to read it, and nobody else is supposed to. You're just simply getting things off of your head, out of your mind. Now, the other thing, too, is community is huge. And I know in a lot of senior centers, I know in a lot of, you know, the senior world, there are senior centers. Now, obviously, unfortunately, in a lot of rural areas, those are hard to come by. But if anybody can, you know, you have to heal in community, especially because betrayal trauma is so isolating. You have to go against the grain, and you have to be in community. It's a very lonesome place to be. So whether if somebody has a computer, you can be online in the computer. Whether it's somebody that can go to an actual center, that would be fine. If you can be around friends and family, that would be fine. If worst case scenario, go out in nature. There's something called phytoncides, and nature gives off these chemicals that actually heal people, and they're called phytoncides. Phytencides. Get in touch with nature. I also tell people, when you are at a place where you're mentally exhausted and your brain is hijacked, do some simple grounding techniques. And there's so many grounding techniques, from, look around you and name 5 things that you see in your room, or, what are 3 or 4 different things you can smell? What are 2 or 3 different things that you can hear, especially if you're out in nature? I mean, there's leaves blowing in the wind, there's birds, maybe there's traffic. These are all things you hear. And that's because you want to come back into yourself. You want to ground yourself. Also, when it comes to somatic techniques, I'm very big on somatic techniques, and you can give yourself what's called a butterfly hug. And basically, you're wrapping your arms around your own self, and you're giving yourself a hug. There's a lot of somatic mental techniques, lying on your bed and pretending there's a warm, fuzzy ball that's entering your body. And what this ball does is it slowly goes all up and down every crevice of your body, and it's eating trauma, and it's starving. And it goes very slow. And when it exits your body, it's full, but it's going to come back. And that's fine, because you didn't heal from your trauma just with that one technique. And so, I'll tell you something. Consistency is critical and key when it comes to healing from betrayal. So there's not a one size fits all thing. Everybody heals differently, but consistency doing these techniques is also critical.
God, that's so interesting. I'm just wondering, we're not here to talk about your books and so forth, but you did write a book called My Journal, From Tears to Transformation. Does that talk about the things that you've just explained to us?
Yeah. So basically, very quickly, working with so many clients and couples, what I've found is that from the time people start doing the deep dive work, now that doesn't mean the time of discovery of betrayal. That means the times people are saying, okay, you know what? I need to get serious about this healing journey. They have roughly, give or take, 90 days, about 3 months, to where they don't feel like they're drowning anymore. They feel like, you know what? I'm at the 3 month, the 90-day point where my nose is above water. I'm still not in the clear, but I don't feel like I'm drowning. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a 90-day prompting journal. Mm. And what this is it's questions every day that ask you various things, everything from questions about, writing maybe some thoughts, intrusive thoughts down, even including how are you going to celebrate yourself today? Because again, betrayal trauma is an identity detachment. It's an identity rupture. And so you want to make sure you get back to you. And if even integrating some of this trauma and renewing some of you. So that's what that journal's all about, is rediscovering the new you. When we go through a betrayal, we come out of a cocoon. At first, just like a butterfly, we're wet. We can't fly. We're weak. I want you to flap your wings, dry off, and soar.
Yeah. How much just for years I have done 3 things, and this, of course, this podcast isn't about me, but I'm wondering if these things might help people that you use when you're going through this. I've always written daily gratitude statements, and I write it by hand. There is, with the real estate company I'm with called Exit, there is something called Prompter, which helps you with affirmations and so forth. But I always write by hand gratitude statements, and I try to do 20 a day. I also do, as I just mentioned, affirmations, where I talk to me, and I talk about, today is going to be the best day I've ever had, or I am strong, I am powerful, I'm going to be successful. No one can get me down because I have the strength to get through it. So I do gratitude, I do affirmations, And I also write intentions daily, 20 intentions. What is it that I want to accomplish today? Are any of these things that you implement into your practice when you're dealing with people?
All the above and more. So here's the deal. I just said when it comes to healing or integrating betrayal trauma, there's certainly not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
And everybody is receptive to different things. Like, for instance, there's EMDR for a lot of people, which, eye movement reprocessing.
Okay.
A lot of times that helps people. A lot of times it doesn't do much for people. A lot of times affirmations help people. A lot of times it's like, that just gives me false hope or what have you.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. A lot of times somatic techniques help people. Other people aren't receptive to somatic techniques. However, absolutely, I will try and give so many things into people's toolbox, that way, because it's like anything else. If you're going to build a home, I'd rather go to a toolbox where there's lots of tools there. I might not use them. They might not be I might not even know how to use them, but I want to have access to them in case I do. So everything you just said is wonderful. Now, I'll just tell you a little something. I took a course at UC Berkeley on the science of happiness. And this was a course where they studied true, authentic
I get
happiness.
it. Yeah.
And you know what they said? They said one of the direct links to internal happiness is gratitude, writing down things you're grateful for. But here's what they found. When you write down something you're grateful for, and this, you don't have to do this, it could be 1, 2, 3, doesn't have to be a lot. If you write 3 reasons why you're grateful for each of those, that works exponentially. So let me just give you a lame example.
I haven't heard that before. That's interesting.
Okay. Well, I just saved you some money because it cost me a lot to take this course at UC Berkeley. And your listeners, but it's all good. So basically, it's like this. Hypothetically speaking, I'm grateful today for my nose. Well, 3 reasons I'm grateful for my nose is because, number 1, when I turn sideways, I like my profile. Number 2, if I ever smell smoke, it keeps me out of danger because I can run from it. Number 3, if I ever bake cookies, I could just smell them and just sit and stew in the awesomeness I just created. That's why I appreciate my nose. So you're not only writing what you're grateful for, you're writing 3 reasons why. Now, if you're doing 20 a day, holy cow, that might take you a little while. So,
yeah.
But 3 reasons why for each thing you're grateful for, that is one of the direct links of internal happiness.
How interesting is that? I haven't heard that before. So thanks for saving me a few bucks. I don't want to travel to California. I really don't want to go to UC Berkeley, but so no, thank you for that. Gosh, we're running out of time. There's a couple of things that I want to ask you, and I have a long list of things. But your signature phrase, as I read about you, is the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone and standard for all other relationships around you. And so for a senior, Mr. J, that has spent 40 or 50 years defining themselves entirely through their roles, their jobs, their spouse, parent, their caregiver, and professional, and have lost some of, I don't know, have lost some of those. How do they even begin to build relationship with themselves? Where do they start, possibly for the first time?
Yeah. Great question, Jim. And I'm going to give you 1 or 2 things that I would suggest. But first of all, let me just say this. What a lot of people may not understand is we are far more than human beings. We are human evolutions. So when we do something to discover who we are, we also have to continually doing that, because you're not the same Jim today than you were 5 years ago, and you're not going to be the same Jim 5 years from now than you are today. You're changing, you're growing, you're learning, you're evolving. And so, it's the same thing with, real quickly, when I talk to couples, I'll say, listen, the person you married is not the person you're married to today. They've changed. So you got to continuously build bridges to that new person, just like you have to continually get to know who you are. So to answer your question, one of the things that I tell people all the time is, what are your core values? strip yourself of all titles. Strip yourself of mom, dad, neighbor. Strip yourself of, master's degree in this and engine. Strip yourself of that. Who are you to the core? Who are you to the core? And that's hard for some people.
Yeah,
That's hard.
I would guess most people don't know who they are to the core.
No, absolutely. But now let me just say this. Once you can write down who you are to the core without any labels, then invert those and let them become your boundaries. Because a lot of people lack not only boundaries, but enforcing boundaries. And that's where we find a lot of problems in life because, it's always, I wanted to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, or I wanted to do this, or, especially seniors, loneliness sets in, which is why there's so many phone scams, financial scams, because it's like, oh, I met this person in Nigeria and we've been talking and they love me so much. And, so we have to write down who we are to the core, invert those into some boundaries, and then really start enforcing those boundaries.
Before I ask you my last question, I want my listeners and viewers who are watching on YouTube to know, the services that you offer and how they can reach out to you. I will, put your website, I'll put more information in the show notes that I'll have along with this. But, I have read that you've offered a free initial consultation to people. I don't know if you still do that, if you do it online, if it's only in person. Tell us about how people can reach out to you and how you might be able to help those people that are listening today that need your help, that maybe realized that they have an issue they need to deal with and they didn't know before today. How can people reach out?
Well, thank you. So first of all, I have, if people are able to be online, I have the easiest website. It's mrjrelationshipcoach.com. But even if people never want to talk to me, hear my voice, work with me, anything, I have a lot of free resources on my website, from interviews like this that offer a tremendous amount of resources and things like that. I just want to say also that I do talk to some couples and clients via Zoom. But also, I also have no problem, and I have a couple clients right now where they don't have Zoom, they don't know how to work Zoom, so we email back and forth with each other. Now, I primarily do that for couples that are in abusive or unsafe situations, but I know there's a lot of people that don't know how to do Zoom, don't know how to do this. So, there's many different ways to work with couples and clients, but absolutely, if they reach out to me, mrjrelationshipcoach.com. I have a mission when I first started this whole career that I wanted to help the brokenhearted, the broken, and the broke. So absolutely, I'm not in this to, go to Hawaii and enjoy surfing on the beach. I'm in this because life has dealt me some pretty challenging hands, and I've learned a lot of those lessons, and I want to help save people from going through the hell that I went through. And I don't want to take those lessons to my grave. So that is my motto, is to help the broken, the brokenhearted, and the broke. Because I remember when I had no money and I still needed help, there was no help out there. And I don't want people to ever feel that way.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. But, maybe if they do, maybe if they feel alone, they can reach out to you and maybe get help. Maybe be able to communicate with somebody that can understand, where they've been and what they've done. I want to ask you one last thing, and I ask this of all my guests. I try to prepare for these podcasts, and so I can deliver information to seniors. But I feel like there's probably one question I should have asked you, but I didn't. I failed to ask that question. If there is something I failed to ask you or that you needed to tell my audience, what might that be?
Well, first of all, let me just say this. I think the mere fact that you just asked that question wasn't a failure to ask it, because now it's open. But I understand what you're saying. One of the things that Jim, this topic is so complex and multi-layered, there'd be no way to cover even a tenth of it in 4 hours.
Yeah.
But one of the things I will mention, had you have asked me, what's one piece of advice you would give anyone experiencing any type of betrayal is to, number one, be very careful with the narrative that you tell yourself. Because I say all the time, others give us pain, we give ourselves suffering. We wouldn't walk down the street, get bit by a poisonous snake, pick up that poisonous snake, and then inject the venom into our vein thousands of times. But yet, what do? We play it in our mind 1,001 times. Why did we go wrong? Why did we say that? How come I'm not good enough? How come that? And all we're doing is pain shopping. And we have to be very careful with that. So realize other people give us pain, we give ourselves suffering. Stop going over it in your head. Stop revisiting that story. It's just causing you unnecessary suffering.
Oh, that's great advice, and I'm just thinking, I mentioned my neighbors around me, and there's a lot of, because this is a retirement community, there's a lot of single people that are living alone. There's a lot of people that I've noticed that don't have family that ever visits them. They have kids that are detached or they're just not around. So I think those people especially have some needs, and maybe you can help them, with those needs. Mr. J, I've got to tell you, I really enjoyed this. You've really enlightened me and helped me understand what betrayal is about, and I know you help many others. I want to thank my audience for being here. I want to thank you, Mr. J, for being here, and I hope we have the opportunity to talk again. And
absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And if you enjoyed this podcast, if you feel there's some value with it, please share it with somebody that you know, someone that might be able to use this information and help them in their life journey. Again, Mr. J, thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.